Namaste and hello. Today again we are going to have transgenerational dialogue, and with me is Dr. Gargi and Urvak, and I'm Dr. Rajesh Rawal. Today we are going to discuss about the occupational change in Indian society at the threshold of information age. So we'll start right to look at this occupational change across different ages. Like we have different ages during the evolution of the mankind, and when the Homo sapiens started to move from the forest of from the hunter-gatherer life to the agriculture, it was already a big change. And then he moved to agriculture age. Then is coming also the copper age, iron age, different ages we are passing through. And whenever the human being is passing through one age to another, there is a occupational change, and it makes some changes in the society, basically in the social changes in the society, and also changes are happening at individual level, and the society is moving from one age to another. And now we are seeing that India is almost at the threshold of information age. I can say that maybe we have already entered the information age, because there are many data scientists working on different data or information which is achieved. And India has entered the information age at very uh, onset, and we did not miss out this information age. And we are also one of the leaders in the information age. Like if you see the information workforce, then India is providing most of the workforce for the information age. So we'll start at the beginning with the views of from Dr. Gargi and Urvak about what do they think about these changes of ages, like from the human evolution point of view. Yeah, Gargi first. Yeah.
Yeah. So I have doubts about the absolute statement that India has entered the
Mm-hmm.
information age. It is. Um, I don't really think we have completely entered that age because a
Mm-hmm.
large group of population hasn't really even entered the industrial age, I would say.
Right.
So there is a lot of contrast into between the different populations of India, and there's a lot of difference. So there's definitely one cream that is providing the workforce for the information age and all the IT and technology or whatever that means. But at the same time, you have a large chunk of population who has not even entered a skilled labor into a skilled labor population, or even an industrially employed. So it would be, I think it is an over, I mean it would be an exaggeration to say that we have really
Mm-hmm.
entered that age. But yes, a certain population has definitely entered, and it's like we have put one foot into the door and not really both the feet into the door.
Right.
Yeah.
But can you also touch about you already mentioned that maybe it looks
Hmm.
like that we have missed out the industrial age, right?
Yes.
Uh,
Hmm.
and what does Urvak thinks about it?
Well, I agree to Gargi in the sense that I had heard about some other countries also who are like India, are developing countries, and they are also skipping some stages of development in some
Hmm.
ways.
Mm-hmm.
Certain things that happened uh, in certain order in the developed world are not happening in that order, or we are directly going to some uh, uh, later forms of development. Uh, so, for instance, there was this statistics that more people have mobile phones than toilets, access to toilets, or something
Mm-hmm.
like that. There is this disproportionate development that is happening, and
Mm-hmm.
maybe we have not yet completely developed in the industrial sector, but we are doing the tech quite nicely. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
and about the general evolution of human civilization, I think that the recent scientific and industrial revolution that happened in the last, say, 200 or 300 years was particularly abrupt. Maybe
Mhm.
if we talk, say, the agriculture revolution or something like that, prehistoric times, maybe there was another such revolution. But maybe at least in the recorded history, I don't think that there was any such revolution that uh, was so abrupt as, say, what has happened in the last 2 or 300 years.
Yeah, you're right in the sense that never in the history of mankind such a fast development and fast moving from the one age to another happened. And in the last 400 years or so, like we moved from the agriculture society to suddenly we moved to the society of industrial society where industry started to develop, and somehow India missed this. And the reason can be that when we got the independence at that time, the country was very much influenced by Mahatma Gandhi, and Mahatma Gandhi even requested British in the round table conference that I request you not to industrialize and spoil our Indians. So that was the major thing, that we were having detest for the new industrial revolution. And although Gandhi was thinking about this, then also like industries too came to India from the private entrepreneurship, where many different individuals who were trying to come up with the industry. But at the same time, the government was not at all supporting, and Jawaharlal Nehru accepted the 5-year policies from the Russian model, Soviet Union model, and this Soviet Union model of economic policies were imposed on India, where the major emphasis was on the heavy industries like mining and other things. But at the same time, individuals who were having, like for instance, GRD Tata was having these mines in for the steel, Tata Steel. They were not very much encouraged, and one time even Nehru told to GRD Tata that I consider profit a filthy word, filthy and disgusting word. So because of this, we did not move to the industry, and whatever entrepreneurs were there who were going, they were enterprising to make an industry, they were not encouraged and they were discouraged. And then, like, you are already observing that we almost missed this industrial revolution. And this is also seen in the statistic that 44% of the Indian population is only living in the cities, whereas most of them are 60% of the population is on the records, they are living in the villages. So villages is the agriculture economy, and from agriculture economy we could not move to the industrial economy. And even in 1991, when PV Narasimha Rao, he opened the Indian society for capitalist investment and industry and all. At that time also, in fact, it was not that he opened the society, but in fact the World Bank had enforced India, because India was a bankrupt country and needed very much finances from the World Bank. And the World Bank put a first condition to open up the country so that the other investors from the other countries can come with the money to open industries. So at that time also we were not willingly opening, but so we were already 20 years behind China. China had already opened themselves to the industrialization in the 70s. So even in 90s we were enforced to open, you know. So we almost missed this industrial revolution, and suddenly we are looking at the brink of the information age. And as Gagi pointed out, quite correct, that even though very small minuscule proportion of the Indians are taking part in the information age, but still because of the large population of India, this minuscule number is such big that it becomes the world's major workforce in the IT.
True. And we should not be swayed by the fact that they are doing this work. So, like, everything is done for the
Yeah, yeah,
country.
yeah,
Right?
you're right. So
Yeah.
we,
And
we cannot
also,
ignore the large proportion of the people who have not even uh, entered the industrial age, and they are now looking at this information age with
true.
their
And
mobiles in
I
their hand,
think,
like
I
Urvashi.
also think that it is premature to say that uh, that will fully, can take advantage of an information age by skipping this industrial age, because at some point of time you do need industrial revolution. To my understanding, provides a physical infrastructure that is
Yeah.
needed to conduct various other non-physical development that has to take place.
Mhm.
Now, by skipping the physical development, I really don't know, it can be a huge hindrance to the non-physical development.
Mhm.
So to say that we hold a very bright future for India just because it's an information age and it doesn't really need a strong physical infrastructure and a basically uh, good physics, that I don't think that holds true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, Surur, what we would like to say.
Um, the other thing is that a lot of if you think about, say, we are very proud that we have a lot of programming jobs and other things, and uh, but again, that's not the only thing, because the scientific development brought about many other jobs, and we are just particularly good at these programming jobs. And I'm not sure how much of that is kind of that developed countries uh, giving us jobs which are not really the the creamiest of the jobs.
Mhm.
So I think that a lot of the programming work is not that challenging. Maybe there are some people who are doing the very core jobs which are high paying, and then there are a lot of people who are doing other, they are programmers, but they are not doing the, you
Mhm.
know, but and not only about programming, even in other things. I was thinking where we do have jobs which are due to the scientific revolution, but we don't do the, say, the core research or the core designing aspects of it. We might be doing things that are less lucrative uh, because we don't have trained population, or that.
Yes, Surur, you are quite right in this because even if you look at the numbers, then it looks like that Indian IT workers are having a large chunk of the people who are working in IT. But if you look at the what kind of work they are doing exactly, then it is more like the West is putting their laborious work, which we have to do it anyway. Like for instance, the testing the softwares and other things. No, but the innovative jobs are not there in IT sector, even in India. So
Well,
Yeah.
same holds true for a core industrial thing like pharmacy,
yes,
because you have all the infrastructure. Actually, there the fallacy is even a greater fallacy because you also have a physical infrastructure to go to manufacture, and all the
right,
things, a pretty developed
right,
infrastructure as yeah, that makes you one of the like biggest makers of the drugs and pharma and everything, but you
yeah,
still do not
yeah.
have
You're
many molecules coming out of that. So
yeah, you're quite right in this also
yeah, so even
because
when you do have a physical infrastructure, there are still many limitations.
mhm.
Yeah.
uh,
Mm.
thing is that the investment what we have to do for getting the reward of new innovation
Mm.
that is not there because we missed the industrial age. We do not have industries, so infrastructures was not there, and
Yeah.
neither India has money and resources for putting the infrastructures or something like that. But the thing is that what we are why we try to develop the IT industry also,
Mm.
it was
Mm.
basically because it was a very cheap way to enter into the this sector, because the IT industry was not requiring so much big infrastructure, or maybe India was already having the setup ready for that. But still, I agree with you that the the individual innovations requires a lot of investment, not only in the terms of the money, but also in the skills and other things, which we have not got.
And a lot of it due to, say, the maturity of our institutions. So I think that certain institutions can only develop can mature only after a long time. For instance,
Mhm.
universities are a very good example, I think. if if a university is producing good students, the results are going to be seen after say 30 years or 40 years. So it's just not possible to build good universities without going through that maturity phase, or build good investment institutions without going through that thing. So maybe we don't have qualified individuals in our country because we don't have those institutions. Those institutions have not gone through that maturity phase which they had to, and we were just behind. So it's not only about just the physical infrastructure, but also this uh, the formation of institutions and their maturity, which leads to uh, people not being in a position to um, educate themselves or be in such mature institutions.
Mm.
Also,
I
as
think,
we discussed, uh, that evolution, in terms of evolution, because the process started much earlier for European countries, essentially European countries where all the innovations come from. uh, India has always been lagging behind it. It kind of had a late start, and as soon as it kind of started, the things started changing even for Europe. So as soon as we entered kind of industrial age and properly trying to set it up, it already changed to information age, and that is information age for the world or for the leaders. So the thing is, in order to even for the industrial phase to mature, we are kind of a shorter we have a shorter of time in terms of that. And again, this information age has really brought about lots of abrupt changes. So
right. So maybe we can move on the second point, and that's about what is the current situation in India. Urvagu, you would like to say something?
Well, I think that so one of the points that I thought was that there are a lot of traditional kind of obsolete thoughts that are shaping public policy at this point of time, such
Mhm.
as there is a lot of protectionism, or not very much, at least now, but there is protectionism, or there is, say, this obsession with self-reliance. Yes. So, people were there was this the current government is trying to increase the self-reliance of the country, and people really were really happy about it. And but for me, it was that's unless you are thinking that it's a very dire situation, and the countries are not going to give us imports, or there's some kind of other international
Mhm.
political issue.
Mhm.
If those things are not there, there is no need to be self-reliant. Actually, a lot of countries have prospered by not being self-reliant,
Mhm.
because they can only focus on the most lucrative parts of the business and just import what is cheaper outside. So and even other thoughts, such as we talked, this glorification of agriculture, or uh, other things, that the policies are not very not shaped by, say, a modern set of thoughts,
Mhm.
uh, or not very, no, not very much in a way that would lead what the kind of policies that have led to the development of the developed countries are
Yeah.
not being applied.
Yeah, you are quite right in this, that we are still living in the nostalgia of self-reliance, and this self-reliance is not some new subject. It was also already raised by Gandhi, and Gandhi onwards, everybody did this, and almost every communist dictator country, dictator ruled country, is also having the same kind of self-reliance motto, or uh, a goal to become self-reliant. And when you are telling that, is quite true, that when we are not having trade embargo, or we are not having trade blockage, then there is no need to produce every single thing inside our own country. And policy lag, also you talk about this, that
there's
policy is
also
still, yeah,
yeah, no, carry on, sorry. Carry on.
policy is also lagging behind. And the laws are not changed easily in India, and if they are changed, then there is a lot of opposition from many different quarters of the society. So it's not that easy. Yes, Kagi.
I think laws will change when the public opinion changes. Ultimately, it's democracy, and government will somehow, in some form, will respect or reflect what the population has in their minds in general. So I don't really blame just the government for it, but it's very much embedded into the psyche of the population. And yeah, so basically the thing is, what I see as a problem is the fact that we have not just glamorized the agriculture, we have glamorized the past. And past, of course, will have the agricultural age and the manual labor age and all of the things which have come
Yeah.
along with it. So we kind of want to glorify that. And yeah, and so
Yeah.
we
That
want to kind of carry on with that.
Yes, Surod.
that I was just saying that we are thinking, we are glorifying the past, and then we are saying that the future is not coming.
Yeah.
Yes,
Uh,
yes.
yes,
Yes,
it's
sir.
quite right. Like
You have to
and
move on from there,
yeah,
basically. The thing is, when you want to acknowledge that your past was really glorious and it had all
yeah,
the,
yeah.
like, you were the leaders of the past,
Mhm.
and if you keep singing that thing and keep carrying on that thing, you will never move on to the present or even the future.
No, you are quite right. Like if you look at
Hmm.
the developed countries right now, then all
Hmm.
of them had looked to the future. None of them looked at the past. Like for
Yeah.
instance, America,
Hmm.
it is the country made from the immigrants, and they don't look
Hmm.
about their past, but they want to
Hmm.
have their American identity, and they
Yeah.
want to build this country. And from
Hmm.
there,
Hmm.
they to raise up. The
Hmm.
same situation is there for the
Hmm.
Canada or
Hmm.
Australia. And in Germany and
Hmm.
Japan case after the
Hmm.
World War, they wanted to forget about past and they wanted
Yeah.
to look to the future. So
Hmm.
all this country achieve the development only
Hmm.
looking at the future, not looking at the past. So you are
Yeah.
quite right in this,
Hmm.
that look at the past is completely useless. There are
Hmm.
only one, two, and three. There are three
Hmm.
countries
Hmm.
who went back from the society, I mean, in the
Hmm.
sense that they were in the industrial age and
Hmm.
then they decided to go back to the agriculture society. And these
Right.
three countries are North Korea.
Hmm.
In 1949, North Korea was the second most industrialized country in the whole Asia after
Hmm.
Japan. Okay,
Hmm.
and from that they went back when the communist dictatorship came into the power. The
Hmm.
dictator decided that we want to go back to the agriculture setup,
Hmm.
and the same thing happened in Iran. That in Iran, when the Islamic Revolution happened,
Hmm.
before the Islamic Revolution, Iran was a modern state with
Hmm.
industries and everything, and
Hmm.
they decided to go back willingly
Yeah.
into
Hmm.
the agriculture society. And the
Hmm.
same thing also happened in Cambodia when the Pol Pot, this dictator, was there,
Hmm.
and he decided that all the city people should move to the village and the village
Hmm.
people should come to the city.
Right.
So you are quite
So.
right in this,
Hmm.
that to have this nostalgia about past and all, it is
Hmm.
something which is related with communism, socialism, or a religious fanaticism or something. And
Yeah.
this should not be adopted into the country like India. And if India
Hmm.
still wants to live in the
Hmm.
nostalgia of this thing and
Hmm.
think that the agriculture and the manual labor is the most honorable work in the society, and
Hmm.
they should be the most protected people in the
Hmm.
society,
Hmm.
then I don't think that India can progress further. We have to leave back the past and we have to go look at the future. That's the only way.
The other thing, I had some objection with Gargi's statement that government always respects, democratic government is going to respect people's opinions.
Hmm.
And that's of course true, but I think in all countries there is this problem where, uh, say for instance, there are farmers who need subsidy. Just an example. Farmers is not, say, the best example, but
Hmm.
let's say any industry. Let's say there are people who are working in a particular industry. They need subsidies, and of course that subsidies are going to come from other people's pockets, and but they are still, but it still makes sense according to vote politics to give that subsidy, even though most people might not want that. So
Hmm.
there are these problems with both politics, uh, and there are constitutional provisions to uh, fight against that. But India in general does a lot of constitutional amendments uh, just for political reasons. And so one of the examples was the right to property. Right to property was a fundamental right in India, which was removed from fundamental rights. Now it's only a constitution.
Oh, I didn't know about that. When did they remove?
Yeah, I'm not sure, but there was this struggle between the Supreme Court and the Parliament, and it was a big struggle. And finally, the Parliament did remove right to property from fundamental rights.
So
And
the thing was that the Supreme Court was insisting Parliament to remove, or was it like that?
no, the Supreme Court was saying that you cannot remove a fundamental right, but
Okay.
Parliament wanted to.
Oh,
And
okay, right.
I guess we'll talk about it on some other podcast.
Okay,
But
right.
story. But the thing is that such laws which were there to protect people from, uh, uh, from say acquisition of property or things that property right to property is very important for industrial development or because you need those. But that was removed, and there were a list of bills that were added which can violate your right to property, etc. And I guess these things also, this kind of politics, kind of dirty politics, you can say, can also harms the country position. And most people don't even know what is a constitutional amendment, so it doesn't matter if you do it for political reasons.
Mm-hmm. Now, what you are telling is quite right. At the onset of the Industrial Revolution in United Kingdom, the similar kind of situation happened that there were set of people, they call them polybius, and these polybius people, they were very much resisting the UK to move into the industrial age. And any industrialist, when he's making the industry, these people were going and burning that industry. And the only way they were controlled was that the government was ready to protect the right of the investors and industrialists, and government took a stringent action on this, and a lot of people died, but the police and paramilitary forces of the United Kingdom stood behind the industrialists to protect their right of the property. So this is, I think, absolutely essential for any investor to feel secure to put his investment for the industry. And when as you are telling, that right of property is not respected, then it can be really tough,
Yes.
to go
So I
into
guess
it.
But I would still want to defend myself into saying that it could hold true in terms of, say, the smaller or the precise issues that we are talking about, that the popular opinion is not being valued. That is, say, for example, in terms of the property law that you said, which, or any other farm bills or whatever that you can take, that the public opinions is actually against what the government is doing. But I think at large, when you do not point out the issue, but at large, whatever action the government takes is, I think, still
yeah,
around what the public, in what direction the public wants the nation to go.
yes,
So it may not be true for like the smaller issue or pinpointed issues, but at large, the direction would definitely be
yes,
reflecting the public opinion.
yes. But yes, of course, I agree to that.
So, for
But
example, I do see a lot of rightist changes coming on. I mean, it is happening, and I also do see that, in general, the um, public psyche is around that. People want capitalism, people want more industrial development, or whatever that is, more physical prosperity, at least.
yes,
Yes,
yes.
Arun.
But, but I guess the general point that I wanted to say is that there is this awareness issue also, because there is democracy, but people don't really understand democracy in India. For example, there is this issue with law enforcement in India. Not really, there is not strict following of rule of law. And I was listening to one person's interview, and he's saying that uh, that. Say there was this Bajrang Dar issues and everything. And so uh, foreign investors don't like that. They would go, see India's news and they say, oh, this country, there is no rule of law. People can come into a place and beat somebody up. And that is not good for investment.
Okay,
So
I think we are getting diverted a little bit in this that we are talking about issue, which is more related with this. But in general, like we all agree that democracy is the one which is providing platform for the people to discuss and bring their desires to the politician. And even though there is a lot of resistance and so it takes time and debates and arguments and the opposition and everything, but eventually it is coming into the law, but it takes time. Like India is still maturing democracy, especially the people has to be educated in democracy, like Urvak said, and because of this, it takes time and all, and we are not mature, but we are on the way towards it, right?
We are halfway
Uh,
into the thing. I should
yes,
add just a small point that the
yeah.
thing is why I think we are kind of, we do have a kind of a desire for physical development and all that prosperity,
Mhm.
in just physical sense. I think there's also a very strong Indian culture that we suppose is the most spiritual kind of a culture that exists, and we have always been raised to, not because of communalism but even otherwise, in terms of, I think, religion or just a general culture which puts less of an emphasis on physical development and more on the supposedly a spiritual side to it. And that's why
Mhm.
probably that is what is stopping us from being 100% committed nation to physical prosperity. That's why
Uh,
probably the desire is probably 60% or 70% and not the 100%.
yeah, I would like to acknowledge the fact that yes, that we are not having the like 100% effort in doing anything. For instance,
Hmm.
not only politics but anything.
Hmm.
But it does not. We cannot pinpoint it to a particular thing, like spiritual development or something, spiritual desires or something.
Hmm.
But in general, the tendency is towards that. I
Hmm.
completely agree with that.
Yeah.
No? Mhm.
Hmm.
So we can move on to the other point, and there is a lot of
We can talk about the labor laws.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, sure. Please go ahead.
yes,
Yeah.
so
That
just
was.
can I, or you are saying
Yeah,
that?
yeah. Urvak, you start.
No,
Yeah.
no. Start with Urvag. Yeah.
Yes, so because of the same kind of socialist kind of or communist philosophy that was prevalent earlier, we are having a lot of socialist laws like very strong labor laws, and even though they are not followed very properly, uh, but that is going to uh, but we have very strong labor laws. For example, even in China, for instance, which is a openly communist nation, they have these laws that they can close down a factory and unemploy so many people if it is not profitable. But India even has a stronger law that even if it is losing money, you have to keep those people employed. So labor laws and kind of very strong labor laws are problems for an organized sector. And what ends up
Mhm.
happening is that India's manufacturing sector is largely organized, largely managed by locally managed businesses, which are not the most efficient way mm, for manufacturing sector to develop. And I guess in general, what that happens is that because everybody is running away from this, the government also loses control over the industry. So strong labor laws are hindering to countries' development a lot, I think. And
Mhm.
uh, again, the same socialist kind of things of the past coming to the present.
Yeah, you're quite right. Like Communist Party of India was always part of the government until the Atal Bihari Vajpayee's government. So
Mm.
until that time, uh, it was always like this that the government was ruled by the Communist Party. Means government was part of the Communist Party was a part of the government, and then there was a lot of resistance to change the labor law because they are the one who are mostly talking about the farmers and soldiers. Mhm.
Yeah, it is still that way. Even if they change labor laws, it is going to be a big issue.
Yeah, but what I would say that when the government has a absolute majority in the parliament, then in the democratic process there will be always an opposition from one point or another from the opposition party. But I think government when they are having strong majority, then they should go ahead and do this labor laws reform because it is absolutely essential if you want to look at the future. No.
Yeah.
Like for instance, in recently there was in Bangalore there was one company which was making the iPhones for the Apple company, and there was a fire in that because the laborers went on the strike and they burnt. Now, now what's the use of having industrial security force, central industry security force, if it is only there to protect only the government run the heavy industries, but not to protect the private industries. So this is absolutely fallacy from the government side, and government should be completely uh, aware about this, and they should be taking some steps towards this because it is not that the industrial security force was raised just to protect the airports and other things, but I think the industry should be protected, right?
Even the, I think, did you mention that the labor laws themselves prevent the labor from being skilled enough?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, because as Urva was discussing beforehand, that you cannot fire the labor forces below the people who receive below certain of a minimum a certain pay, some
Yeah.
5,000 or something. You cannot fire them. Now,
Hmm.
what that builds is you have to retain the non-skilled or the non-optimally functioning labor for the sake of it. And because they have this assurance, they are not even going to amp up their skills just in order to feel employed. So
Hmm.
that also, yeah, and that prevents people from investing into their education or upskilling their own labor.
Right.
So yeah, that's a big issue.
Right. Now we can discuss the next topic, and that was about the resistance to change in occupation. Like
Yes.
in every society, whenever I believe that when even the industrial revolution happened, and before that, even the new scientific discoveries were made by many different scientists, then they find very huge resistance in the society, and there was a there are many scientists who were burned to death just because of their innovations and all these things. So I think resistance is something very much inbuilt. Resistance is not happening when the change of the age is happening. Only in the, for instance, there was no resistance when China was industrialized in 1970s because it was the communist oppressive occupation where the people are not allowed to express themselves. No, but otherwise I think I I am also assuming that whenever there was an innovation, even the innovation of the wheel first time by a human being, or innovation of agriculture by the human being, they were opposed by their society. i I don't think that the opposition was not there. No, so the resistance is always there, and especially there are like wasted group of people like
Hmm.
who are up there in their society, and they want to maintain their
Status quo.
social status quo,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that's why they will resist it. Like I want to mention that George Orwell told that we know that no
Hmm.
one ever seizes the power with the intention
Hmm.
of relinquishing it. So nobody wants
Hmm.
to give away their power, what they got. So power can be in terms of the money, or power can be in the terms of the strength, social strength, or whatever they have. It's very, and that kind of resistance we are also seeing now when government wants to help the farmers to bring them into the electronic trading of the goods of the farmers, but the same time we see the group of some group of farmers are protesting because their vested interest is going to be, they have to change their profession, and nobody is ready to change their profession and learn something new.
True.
That is there.
I think there's a lot of social angle to it. Probably
Mhm.
we are going to discuss that into the next
Yeah,
section.
yeah.
I think casteism has a big role to play in there.
Mhm.
Let's just talk about India. Why is so strong resistance in India? I guess it's more of a strong resistance than it is in other cultures or other countries, wherever, other geographies. That I think that has again got to do with the culture, casteism, and a lot of other factors. But yes, the thing is even in biology, what we have is that the cell always tries to maintain the milieu interior,
Mhm.
or the status quo. So everybody likes the stability, everybody likes to keep things as they are because they give you a sense of security. You know that even if it's a bad situation, you know how bad it can be,
Mhm.
right? So if you jump onto a new occupation, it may be like it's like a fear of unknown that we have around anything else or any other area of our life.
Mhm.
Yeah, so when you change an occupation, probably it has got its own challenges, its own uh, uncertainties along with it. So even it's the same thing that we have whenever we are going through a major life change, a major life event that's gonna like really change your life. We do have a certain sense of resistance to it. We do not want things to change in general, and we are fearful of change basically.
Yeah.
So it's of course I agree with you. It's that mentality which operates,
Mhm.
and we ultimately but do get through it. So that's what is needed to be done.
Also, like we have, because of the democracy,
Hmm.
we have the freedom to express, and
Hmm.
because of this, we're able to express our opposition also. Like in the non-democratic society or places, where this thing does not happen,
Hmm.
or even if the protest happens, we don't know about it, and nobody
Yeah.
knows about it,
Yeah.
right?
Hmm.
Okay. So now we'll talk about the social angle and
Sure.
the social issues like dynamics of the family or tribe, psychological fear of the people.
Hmm.
Would you like to contribute something, Urvak?
Yes. So one of the big problems with India is that, as you pointed out, was that people are very dependent on their social circles and their society or their caste or their
Yeah, yeah.
local, what do you say,
Community. Hmm.
community,
Hmm.
for all kinds of support. So,
Mm-hmm.
say for support in their old age or support in bad health, they look to the community instead of institutions for their
Mm-hmm.
support.
Right.
And the way Indian communities are divided, people don't really want to change their occupation. And again, as Gargi pointed out, I'm just telling you, but that people don't want to change their occupations because that would alienate themselves from their communities, because their
Mm-hmm.
communities are made by which occupation they uh,
Mm-hmm.
follow. And therefore, they don't want to change and say go to a city because that would alienate them from their community, and their community is their support system. They just cannot. Uh,
Yes, India is in these special circumstances
Hmm.
because the communities have developed over the centuries and maybe thousands of years. And this happened basically because for a long time also we were ruled by the people who were not of indigenous origin, and when you know that the government is not supporting you, if you have problems with the law or something, like even in the current situation also there is a problem, like I'm afraid to do job with somebody who is unknown to my social milieu or
Hmm.
social tribe. I'm afraid to do job with him because if I end up having any kind of problem or conflict with him, then for the conflict resolution, I cannot go to the government because the current justice and law system is not efficient enough to solve my problem, and I have no hope to get the justice from that. And because of this, I more rely on the my tribe and my caste kind of people, because I'm 100% sure that because of the social pressure, I'll be able to solve the problem inside my own tribe. And because
True.
of this, I try to do business only in my own tribe or only on my caste. And it was similar also during the uh, Muslim rule or maybe the British rule, because people were trying to solve their problem locally because they were knowing that they are not going to get justice from the this. If you just look at the number of the backlog of the court cases, how many court cases which are going on for years and years, and justice is not delivered on time. It is almost like justice denied. And because of this, people only wants to do business, or they want to have economic exchanges also only among the tribe or among the caste or
Yes.
community,
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
which is not the case in the Western world, because the justice and law department is so fast and so sure to make the decision that
Hmm.
it does not take many years to make simple court cases decision. And you are almost sure to get the justice. Like for instance, I can tell you that even in a small city in Germany, there is a constitution court. Like
Hmm.
Urvag was telling, that many times the constitution is completely overruled by the parliament or the lawmakers or the justice department. So when you have a problem, you don't go to the normal court, but there is a special constitutional court. And this constitutional court is existing in every big city. So you can imagine that the availability of the justice for the normal human being is much more faster and much more facilitated by all this thing. You know.
True.
Uh, but if you want to centralize everything, that everything is central based, Supreme Court only can take care about the constitutional decision, then the federal structure is not respected. And like he was telling, Urvag was telling, that federal structure should also be efficient enough to make many of the decisions on their own, federal states, not relying everything on the too much dependence on the central government of for doing anything. It is making us very much hindered. Like you might have listened that recently we listened about Pennsylvania State Supreme Court. So even the Pennsylvania state itself has its own Supreme Court. So
Yeah.
this kind of things makes the decision much more faster and much more fluid. No?
I wouldn't agree to the fact that making things more at local level is going to solve the problem, because the more local you make, the more divided it becomes. Basically,
Mhm.
say for example, if you have a local court, there will be a local social group that is much more dominant, or say for example, a social group that has much more of a control over the justice system
Mhm.
of that local
Yeah, yeah.
geography,
Uh-huh.
right? So they are going to take over, and I mean, that's again going to be unfair to all the other communities. And it's
Right.
again, when you have everything operating from a local level, another, people from the same community that have like control over the law will
Mhm.
again jump into the law system, and that way it's not going to open up.
Yeah. I would like
So
to say that
I'm like a
uh,
little
no,
skeptical about
what you are
that.
pointing out is quite true.
Hmm.
And this is happening in the Jat agitation or Maratha agitation,
Yeah.
or maybe Patels asking for the reservation and all these things.
Hmm. Hmm.
They are the dominant group and they don't want to lose their dominance, and
Yeah.
because of this thing is happening. But
Hmm.
what I would suggest that when we are moving to this is basically proving that
Hmm.
the problem lies in the large population lives still in the villages and other
Hmm.
suburban places,
Hmm.
because
Hmm.
I think when the people move from the village to the urban places, then in urban places this caste discrimination does not happen.
Yeah.
like, like for instance, I was very much surprised. I was
it,
visiting.
it is less, it's significantly less.
Yes,
Hmm.
it is significantly less. Like
Hmm.
I was visiting one small village in Uttar Pradesh, and
Hmm.
I'm meeting the first village man who is
Hmm.
coming out with his goats. And first
Hmm.
thing he asked me is, "What is my caste?" And I was so much flabbergasted. I was thinking, why do you ask for my caste? Even you did not ask me where do I come from.
Yeah, that's the first thing. Even when we went to a local village for some religious functions,
Yeah.
people are like, Brahman cho. They
Mhm.
won't ask your name. They will straight away ask you what caste you
Yeah.
belong to, and it's not even. For us, it can be a little surprising and a little insulting as well.
Yeah.
But that's the social norm. That's
Yeah.
they're not
Yeah,
at
because
all apologetic about it. It's
as soon
the
as you
norm.
tell them that what caste you belong, then they
Hmm.
you in a specific
Yeah.
form they imagine.
Yeah.
Yes, Urvak.
Yeah, that's true. I don't have much to add, but in cities, it is considered slightly insulting to ask them. People will hesitate to ask what caste you belong to or something like
Yes.
that.
Yes.
Not
Uh-huh.
considered good to ask that, but like in yes, uh,
Yeah.
I
Another
would
point.
like to add another point here,
Yes.
that even before you ask for justice,
Mhm.
you at least need an entry into another system.
Mhm.
Say, for example, you want to enter some other profession that is your non-traditional profession or non-ancestral profession.
Mhm.
So there are even barriers to entry to that. We don't
Yeah.
even talk about forget about the injustices once you
Yeah.
get into it.
Yeah. What kind of
So
area you want?
say, for
Any idea?
example, you do not have a good again an educational infrastructure, all an infrastructure that imparts you with skills that enable you to carry on into a different profession.
Mhm.
And again, so a lot of profession, I think all the other professions have to be kind of, so you have like a university education, a more theoretical kind of education, and then you have something like a hands-on or more of an internship or apprenticeship or something like that, that
Mhm.
really like on the job learning, what you say. Now those avenues are probably not available again because of casteism. So number one, we are short of educational institutions. So
Mhm.
that problem is a very fundamental physical problem that and especially holds true for skill-based system. Say, for example, somebody wants to become a barber. You do
Mhm.
not have a university or a proper system in
Yeah.
place to make good barbers. You probably have that for, say, for example, if you want to jump into IT or you want to do some other white collar job, probably yes, you have uh, a degree imparting or certificate
Mhm.
imparting system, but not so for
The skill labor.
skilled labor.
Mhm.
So a person doesn't really have avenues to learn.
Mhm.
Second comes the employability of that, even if you do hold an education or something like that. The thing is, the system is so tight and it is so much, a lot of times, community dominant or a family dominant system, that even if you want to get into, say for example, you get into a barber shop, you will be forced, I mean, you will be sidelined, you will not be able to learn I mean, the core job that has to be done.
Mhm.
You are less likely to be given all the opportunities to learn or all the stages to learn just because you
Right.
do not come from that environment.
Mhm.
Say, for example, I'll talk about myself. Me being a Brahmin, which is something not associated with a business background, I do not have any access to, number one, research around. I mean, I can be holding a commerce degree or a business degree, but
Mhm.
I do not really have people to go to survey the market, or
Mhm.
people to talk to who will
Yeah.
actually tell me the truth about a certain market, a niche, a local environment that exists. Right? Everything you cannot just search on internet and
Mhm.
do it from the data. Another thing is, you go in and, say for example, join somebody who is already working into that just to learn what happens and how the things work.
Yeah.
Now again, that is very limited. You
Mhm.
will be asked your family background or your caste, things like that. It's not that easy. There are entry barriers and these are very vague. I cannot really describe it, but they are very understated barriers.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. What would like to say?
and in general, I guess overall, the kind of thinking a
Also, can
person.
I finish myself?
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
just
Sure. Why not?
yeah. The thing is, again, that caste system also has developed into a hierarchy. So certain jobs being considered as less respectful than others. So even if someone wants to jump into a less lucrative profession or a less economically rewarding profession into something that is considered as socially a lower profession, but might be a more of an income generating profession. So whatever might be your reason, the reason why you want to shift from one profession into another, you also have to consider a lot of social impacts of that. You know, you could just be shamed, or you could be just again alienated from your own community, or not well positioned enough in your own community if you change your profession.
Okay.
So yeah.
Yes, Uruk.
This is just one of the manifestations of a larger problem where a person's thinking, instead of going with, say, what is good for my country or what is good for even for me, it becomes what is good for my community. So again, such as these problems, such as people are not ready to teach their profession to people who are not from their community, or problems, or but other problems also, even a lot of the politics that is happening, and people are not thinking what is good for my country, they are thinking what is good for my community, and then that fights occur. And I'll give you one of the examples of such union like behavior. If there is a construction worker in India, and if they will not complete an half done work, that's the thing. So if you fire a person, say, who is making your furniture, and that he has not done the work of the whole house, another another carpenter won't take that work, okay, just because that he unemployed one of the people from my community, and I'm not going to work from him, and they will have some religious justifications for that. And this kind of behavior, now what happens, people don't fire a person who is inefficient, so the incentive to be efficient is lost. And so again, just this thinking where people think about their community, and essentially different communities are fighting, and they have fought and reached the equilibrium where everybody has their own place. But because of technology, everything got disrupted, and now there is this struggle between people. Uh, we have to remold ourselves into a, because I guess I guess the point I was making is across.
Okay.
Also the fact that and why this thing, why people do not, again it comes back to the point we discussed at the first go, that people do not feel one with the nation, they feel one with the community. There is a sense of belonging towards community, a special emotion, and yeah, a regard for that community which they do not have for the nation. Yeah.
I would like to say something about this because the skill development is basically professional schools, which can. I would like to give example of Germany because I'm very much familiar with this country. And in Germany, there are professional schools. So after 10th year of the school or after 12th year of the school, you can join this professional school. And these professional courses are given right from the. It was similar like India in earlier in time in Germany also. Like in Germany, you have surname called Muller. Muller means the one who takes away the garbage. Okay. Then Smith means the businessman. Okay. So similar kind of system was there, that there was mayor, there was a baron, there was a noble people, there was a but now what happened, that your name can be Muller but you are doing businessman or something. Okay. And how did Germany achieve this? Was that in the professional school, after the school is finished and when they go to the professional school, if they are not going for the scholastic work, academic job, academic, then they go to the university. But a large chunk of people who do not go to the academics, I think 60 to 70% of the students go for the professional schools. And in professional schools, you can be taught whatever you choose. If you want to become carpenter, you are taught carpentry in this school. So first of all, that you are not going to the hereditary family-based carpentry school to learn, but you are going to a professional school supplied by the government where you can learn carpentry, where you can learn hair cutting or whatever you choose, whatever profession you choose. So that thing is very much taken care of there by the government. And another way was government is providing a lot of social support. So this social support is very much essential in the sense that the person is not relying on a community for the social support.
Hmm.
Like, for instance, if some
Hmm.
death happens in my family, I'm not looking
Hmm.
for the support from my family members or something, but I call to the social arm here, social department of the government, and then I ask them that this thing has happened. Like, even for some small issues, like for instance, uh, there is issue of conflict between the child and the parent or anything, or the husband and wife or something. Then there is family department where I know that I'm going to get very professional psychological advice. As the one counselor will be appointed to me who is going to guide me in correct way. And the same way, like if in my profession, if I want to upskill myself and learn something more, then also I can go and I can get the counseling for that, and then I can be enrolled in a specific course where I can upskill myself in a particular profession. No, so I think this kind of support, when government is providing more support, then you can go from the support of this tribe or the caste or something. But when government is not providing support, then of course everybody wants to have their property right, intellectual property right in the terms of the profession, and that's why they are always not easily admitting somebody from the outside caste to their profession. But when government is having a technical school or a professional school where you can go and learn how to become a stock market trader, okay, there is a property agent, okay,
Hmm.
for every profession what you can think of, there, there is a special class, where they go for, after the 10th year of the school, usually they go for 3 years education, and then they become uh, good in to go into the profession. Every profession is license based, and the license is the professional school's ending certificate. So even you cannot become barber if you do not have this license. license.
Hmm.
So
True.
when government is going to provide such kind of support, I think we will be able to solve this problem. This is how the other countries have solved problem, and this can be a light where which even India can follow, I believe.
I don't. I think, but there are other countries such as if you look at say USA or
Mhm.
Australia, then
Yeah.
they don't do this. So I'm not really sure. Is it due to the intervention of government, or is it just due to a general social development that a
Uh,
country goes through
okay, like
in
if
its?
you, yeah, I think you are raising a valid point. USA and Australia have little bit less socialistic values, but still government is providing support. Like for instance, if you are going to the college, I'm not talking about the university, but if you are an American student and you are going to the college, if you are a black minority and you are going to the black college, minority based colleges and all, and you are lacking funds and all, then at least government is providing you the fee support in the initial stage. So it is something like loan, okay? It is not like German government where you are providing free education, but in America and Australia you have to pay back when you are getting the profession. But still, in this professional school you are enrolled, and you are provided at least the support that you can get the skills to go into the work market. you know so it is not exactly that the US government is not providing support. Even you can listen now also that they are even talking about the university fees uh, to waive something for the COVID-19 situation and all, because even the students are not allowed to work into the restaurant because restaurants are closed and all, so they cannot earn money to support their education or something. No? And so I think similar kind of system is there. Their name is different in Australia and UK and United States, but there is some kind of support which is there from the government. No, they are giving loan and which you have to pay it back, but it's different one. Mm.
Okay.
Also, I think, okay, fine, it might solve the problem, but I think a major issue is also this hierarchical structure that
Mhm.
even prevents people to even knock the doors of those educational institutions.
Mhm.
Yeah, so I really don't know how to go over that problem. I mean, how you do overcome that problem? But there is a definite social hierarchy, and you could slip down into the social hierarchy even with good finances by changing your profession.
Mhm.
So yeah, that problem, I don't know how it is to be addressed.
Maybe that's a different topic to discuss on the different podcast. Maybe
Yeah.
we can, yeah, right? Okay, thank
Right.
you very much. It was a nice conversation. Thank you, Urvak, and thank you,
Okay.
Gargi.
Yeah.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.